Hey guys, this week we are going to do what I like to call fractured fairy tales. They are different versions of different fairy tales. So tonight we are going to do a Native American version of Cinderella. It is called The Roughface Girl by Rafe and illustrated by David Shannon. Once long ago, there was a village by the shore of Lake Ontario. Off from the other wigwams of this village stood one great, huge wigwam. Painted on the sides were pictures of the sun, the moon, stars, planets, trees, and animals. And inside this wigwam, there was said to live a great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome invisible being. However, no one could see him except his sister, who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry the invisible being, but his sister said, only the one who can see him can marry him. Now in the village, there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. The 2 older daughters were cruel and hard-hearted, and they made their younger sister sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, the sparks fell on her. In time, her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms, too, became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by the fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those 2 older sisters laughed and said, "Ha, you ugly rough-faced girl," and they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. One day, these 2 older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces, give us some buckskin dresses, give us some pretty bead moccasins. We are going to marry the invisible being." So the father gave them these things. Dressed in their finest, the 2 girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared. "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those 2 girls were proud and hard-hearted before, they were even more prouder now. They walked haughtily through this village. At last they came to the wigwam of the invisible being, and there was his sister, waiting. "Why have you come?" she asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why we're here." "If you want to marry my brother," she replied, "you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can't you see how pretty we are? Can't you see the beautiful clothes we wear?" "Oh yes, anyone can tell that we've truly seen the invisible being." "All right," said the sister. "If you think you've seen him, then tell me, what's his bow made of?" And suddenly her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. His bow," they stammered in surprise. "His bow, we know. They turned desperately to one another and they whispered, "What shall we say? Let's say oak tree." So they said, "It is the great oak tree." "No," said the sister of the invisible being. "No." Oh, she saw at once that they had lied. "Tell me," she continued, "if you think you've seen my brother, the invisible being, then what's the runner of his sled made of?" We know, cried the 2 sisters. But whispering feverishly again, they wondered, "What shall we say? What shall we say? Let's just say the green willow birch." "No," the sister said when she heard. "No, you have not seen my brother. Now go home." "Just test us fairly," they exclaimed. "We've seen him. We just don't know the answer to these silly questions." "All right," said the sister of the invisible being. "Come with me." And she took them back into the great wigwam, and sat them in the seats furthest from the entrance, the guest seats. Soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters still could not see a thing. Suddenly, a great bow and a beaded quiver of arrows appeared in the air where they sat. But though these two girls sat there, their eyes wide, all through the night they never saw a thing. And in the morning, they had to go home, ashamed. Now the next day, the rough-faced girl went to her father and said, "Father, may I please have some beads? May I have new buckskin dress and maybe some moccasins? I'm going to marry the invisible being, for whenever I look, I see his face." But the father sighed. "Daughter," he said, "I am sorry. I have no beads left for you, only some little broken shells. I have no buckskin dress, and as for moccasins, all I have left are my very old, worn, cracked, and stretched out pair from last year, and they are much too big." But she said, "Whatever you can spare, I can use." So he gave her these things. Then she found dried reeds, and taking the little broken shells, she strung them into a necklace. She stripped birch bark from the dead trees and made a cap, a dress, and leggings. Then, with a sharp piece of bone, she carved in the bark pictures of the sun and the stars, the moon, plants, trees, and animals. She went down to the lake shore and soaked the moccasins in water until they grew soft, and then she molded them to her feet. They were still too big, and they went flap, 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 like duck's feet when she walked. All of the people came out of their wigwams, and they pointed and they stared. "Look at that ugly girl," they laughed. "Look at her strange clothes. Hey, go home, you ugly girl. You'll never marry the invisible being." But the rough-faced girl had faith in herself, and she had courage. She didn't turn back. She kept on walking right through the village. As she walked, she saw the great beauty of the earth, and the sky spread before her. And truly alone, of all the village, she saw the things and the sweet, awesome face of the invisible being. At last she came to the lake shore just as the sun was striking behind the hills, and many stars came glittering out like fiery veil in the darkening sky overhead. And there, standing on the water's edge, was the sister of the invisible being, waiting. Now the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman. When she looked at you, she didn't see your face or your hair or your clothes. No, when she looked at you, she looked right into your eyes, and she could tell all the way down to your heart. And she could tell if you were good, kind-hearted, or cold, hard, and cruel. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once through her skin was scarred, and her hair was burnt, and her clothes were strange, that she had a beautiful, kind heart. And so she welcomed her dearly, saying, "Oh, why have you come?" And the rough-faced girl replied, "I have come to marry the invisible being." "Oh," said the sister very gently now, "if you want to marry him, you have seen him. Tell me, have you seen my brother, the invisible being?" And the rough-faced girl said, "Yes." "All right," said the sister. "If you have seen me, tell me, what is his bow made of?" And the rough-faced girl said, "His bow? Why, it is the great curve of the rainbow." "Ah!" exclaimed the sister in excitement. "Tell me," she asked, "if you have seen my brother, the invisible being, what are the runners of his sled made of?" And the rough-faced girl looked up into the sky and said, "The runners of his sled, why, it's the spirit road, the Milky Way of the stars that spreads across the sky." "Oh," cried the sister in wonder and delight, "you have seen him. Come with me." And taking the rough-faced girl by the hand, She led her back into the great wigwam and sat her in the seat next to the entrance, the wife's seat. Then they heard footsteps coming along the path, closer and closer. The entrance flap of the great wigwam lifted up, and in stepped the invisible being. And when he saw her sitting there, he said, "At last we have been found out." Then smiling kindly, he added, "And oh, my sister, she is beautiful." And the sister said, "Yes." And the sister of the invisible being then gave the rough-faced girl the finest buckskin robes and a necklace of perfect shells. "Now bathe in the lake," she said, "and dress in these." So the rough-faced girl bathed in the water of the lake, and suddenly all her scars vanished from her skin. Her skin grew smooth again, and her beautiful black hair grew in long and glossy as a raven's wing. Now anyone could see that she was indeed beautiful, but the invisible being and his sister had always seen that from the start. At last, the rough-faced girl and the invisible being were married, and they lived together in great gladness and were never parted. Yeah, I wanted to show y'all this picture. So on her way, and she said she could see him. Do you see his face in this picture? Can you see? The eagle and the tree and the cloud making a mouth and the rainbow coming down to make his nose. Can you see his face? It's my favorite picture. So when we read stories like this, we can see how this is like Cinderella and how it's different from Cinderella. There were two evil sisters. There are two evil sisters in our original Cinderella story. She has to tend a fire and do chores. In the original Cinderella story, Cinderella has to tend fire and do chores. But there are differences too. She didn't get to go to a ball and have a glass slipper or anything like that, did she? So it's nice to talk about how they're similar and how they are different. Hope you have a great night, and we will read another one tomorrow. Good night.